Greetings and salutations, friends and gamers of all stripes. My name is GM Dave, your man behind the screen, and welcome to another episode of Striving for Greatness. This is going to be more impromptu episode, as you can see, kind of a little more off the cuff. Usually I tend to script out So You Want to Be a GM and Striving for Greatness. I like to kind of write out a little script for that, a little guideline to sort of keep things in mind with it. But with as busy as I've been at work lately, it's been really difficult to find the time to do that. So for this one, I'm just gonna go off the cuff with it. I actually tried recording this earlier today. That's why we're actually getting a night drive for once in my wife's car instead of my own. Actually, she's actually out of town this week, and she's coming back tomorrow, but she's been out of town since last Wednesday. Been visiting some family, extended family out in Minnesota. So her car's been home with me, and I figured, it's been a few days since I hopped in it and drove it around and made sure the battery was okay. So made for a good excuse to attempt to re-record this episode. I actually attempted to record it on the way home from work, but it was so hot out today. It was actually 101 when I got off of work at 3 o'clock. Actually, no, later than that. I did overtime today, so I got off work at about, almost 4 o'clock today. I was supposed to be off at 3, and it was 101 out when I got off. Even hotter than that in my car. So I hopped in the car, rolled down all the windows, blasted the AC at max to get it to cool down in the car a bit, and then once the AC is really working, I get the windows back up so it's not quite as hot in there. But the phone still overheated despite that. So I had gone through the entire episode, everything I wanted to discuss, and then when I get home, I notice my screen is black. Oh, okay, what's going on here? So I hit my home button, and it tells me, we have shut down, or the phone has shut down your apps to to protect it from overheating. It's like, oh, great. So, yeah, it was still so hot in the car that my phone overheated and stopped recording. I don't even know when. It lost the entire recording. So, I'm not sure when it stopped. But either way, we're going along with it now. We're going to re-record what I did. And today's topic is actually going to be one that was brought up by the GM, although actually I should say, unfortunately, former GM of the Star Wars campaign I used to be in. That's unfortunately another casualty of how busy I've been with work lately, is that it's just sort of I've come to the realization this week, with as hectic as everything has been, I'm gonna have to leave that campaign. I just don't have the time or the energy to follow through with it, between the many days that I'm doing overtime at work, the fact that I'm actually going to have a bit of a schedule shift coming back that I wasn't having to deal with before, but now I'm gonna actually have alternating schedules at work each week, which is gonna make it even more difficult to keep up with that. And on top of that is the fact that over the past month, I've had to travel up about 120 to 150 miles out of town to go to the warehouse for the Southern California district of the business I work for, to pick up will calls every week, will calls to bring back down because of customers that needed specific products that we didn't have on hand, or didn't have enough on hand of, because we got a few hundreds of thousands to $1 million jobs going out of my store right now. So it's pretty crazy right now. It's very busy, and it's been making it difficult for me to keep up with the channel. But hey, just this last week, I had a sudden uptick, a sudden upswell of new support, due very largely to a group of people on Minds who have been showing me incredible support this last week. Just yesterday, I had about 8 or 9 new subscribers, lots of people showing me massive support, and thank you all very much for that. I appreciate it greatly. So even in spite of how busy things have been at work, I'm just feeling more inspired than ever to keep this channel going and really find a way to make it work. So today's topic, like I mentioned, was brought up by the GM of the Star Wars game I was in. And he suggested this actually in the first week I was doing videos. So I've had this on the back burner for a few months now, but now feels like a good time to tackle it. And we're going to discuss the importance of good communication and more specifically, what good communication entails. Now, I've discussed this a little bit in previous episodes of So You Want to Be a GM, and I actually did consider making this a So You Want to Be a GM video, but I thought better of it when I started kind of considering the fact that this is something that is really universal to everyone at the table. It applies to everybody. It might be biggest with the GM specifically, but it absolutely applies to everyone sitting at the table. So the first thing that you want to consider when it comes to good communication is just being open and willing to actually communicate. And that's both in terms of positives and negatives. Now, it's much easier when it comes to the positives. It's very easy to compliment someone when they do something well, to just be like, hey man, yeah, that was a good job. And that's actually a very important thing to do with new players who are trying to get into the hobby. Experienced players and experienced GMs should be giving compliments to the new players frequently when they start pushing their boundaries and kind of getting out of their bubble and trying to role play and do all those things that every single one of us knows was kind of uncomfortable for us and kind of awkward for us at the start. Giving compliments and being willing to do that for new players is a great way to help them get comfortable with the game. And I encourage everyone to do that. It's a great thing for good communication. However, even more importantly is being willing to be open about when you notice a problem at your table. Whether you're the GM, especially actually as the GM, being willing to arbitrate, that's incredibly important. But as a player as well, you need to be willing to open up and make note of if you see a problem at your table. You need to be willing to mention it, say something about it. Now, the reason why this is kind of difficult for people is because this is the sort of thing that when it gets brought up, we start to think, well, I don't want to hurt my friend's feelings. And that's very fair. You know, none of us wants to be that person that ends up hurting our friend's feelings. And because of that, sometimes if something's going off at the table, if there's an awkward situation, if maybe a player's being a little too upfront, taking too much of the spotlight, or maybe they're pushing boundaries that you guys didn't really clearly set early on, which is another important thing, by the way. That ties into being willing to communicate. Before your games start, you do have to be willing to set your boundaries, and that requires that you be willing to talk about the things you guys are not comfortable with exploring at your table. So say somebody is pushing those boundaries and exploring a topic that you're not comfortable with, and it's really making you feel awkward. Well, you got to be willing to step up and say something about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be to that player, but at least to your GM. You need to be willing to talk. If you're not willing to talk, if you're not willing to speak, if you're not willing to make your feelings known, if you're too scared to do that, and you don't let yourself do that, well, then the problem is never going to change. The situation is never going to change. And it's just going to continue, and you run the risk of things boiling over and becoming a serious issue. So you need to be willing to talk. That's rule 1. Rule 2 is almost equally important. In fact, I would actually say personally that rule number 2 is every bit as important as rule number 1. And that is, especially when it comes to criticism, approaching what you're doing, approaching what you're saying politely. Say what you have to say politely. Now, what is considered polite is going to vary from table to table. Good example, obviously, I can give are examples from my core gaming group, my core friends that I game with the most. My friends and I, we love raunch humor. We love dark humor. We love really dirty humor, and sometimes we even like push the bounds into the kind of humor that would really offend some people if they were around us and not comfortable with that sort of thing. But that is why we keep it expressly to, generally speaking, our core group of friends. Now for us, because we all know each other so well, we all know we don't mean those sorts of things. Like if we say a really disgusting joke or something like that, like a dead baby joke or something, we're not really calling for the murder of babies. We're making a joke. It's amongst ourselves. Most people would probably consider that to be really rude and really crass. And let's be fair, it is. But at my gaming table with my core group of friends that I know really well and have been gaming with for decades, well, our situation is different. We know each other really well. We know what our limits are, what our boundaries are. We know what to expect from one another. And so we know how far we can push things before they go too far. And honestly, we can push things pretty fucking far. We do not really get uncomfortable with very many things. There are very few things that we get uncomfortable enough with to not joke about when, again, it's that core group of really close personal friends. What the hell are these guys doing? I don't know what the hell these idiots are doing. I don't know. They're blocking the road. It's fucking moving on at least, but anyway, that distraction aside. So politeness is going to vary from table to table and group to group. However, as a general rule of thumb, if there is even one person there that you don't know especially well, that you don't really know what their boundaries are, then generally speaking, you want to be as absolutely polite as possible. You want to approach, especially criticisms, in the most open and positive way you can. Just make clear what you have to say. Don't be rude about it. Let them know what the grievance is, but don't be mean about it. Don't be demanding about it. Just point it out. Be like, hey, I've noticed you're doing this. It's a little bit disruptive. Please try to dial it back. If you could try to dial it back a little bit, we would all really appreciate that. Which leads me then into part 3, the third big point of what I consider to be key to good communication, and that is making sure that especially when you're criticizing someone, specifically if you have a criticism, make sure it's actually a valid criticism. Make sure that you're not just hating on someone and the way that they're playing because you personally don't like it. A good example of making sure you've got a valid criticism came a few years back when, with largely one of my core gaming groups, a very good bunch of friends of mine that I was playing with, I got the opportunity to play with a YouTuber who I used to watch. He was a small-time YouTuber, much like myself. He'd been doing it at this time, obviously. I was not doing YouTube at this time, not making videos. I was on the side. I've had this channel, this account for, pretty much since YouTube was first a thing. This account's it's like 12 years old at this point, damn near 11 or 12 years old. I made it back in like 2007, I think, maybe even a little older than that. But this guy had been making videos for quite a while now, and they were Godzilla-related videos. That's how I found him. So I'm a lifelong Godzilla fan, and he's a lifelong Godzilla fan. And during a video that he made and this was back, I believe, in about 2013, maybe 2012, where discussion abounded about what was going to be the new Godzilla movie in 2014. He was asking, because this was around the time of Comic-Con, he was asking if any of his fans and any of his watchers had actually made it to Comic-Con, were able to get into Hall H, were able to see Legendary's big preview of it, and what was going to go on with it. And I made it to Hall H for that, because that was specifically, I didn't give a shit about anything else that was going on in Hall H. I didn't care about the Marvel panel. I didn't care about, Warner Brothers talking about the DC movies. I didn't even care about The Hobbit at that time. And I love Lord of the Rings, and I thought I was going to love The Hobbit. I didn't really love it. I didn't think it was as horrible as everyone else does. I found some entertainment in it, but God, that's a fucking bad movie. Tangent, though, not relevant to the story. Point is, I was there, I was able to talk with him about it, but in that same video, he also made mention of the fact that he had just purchased the Pathfinder starter set, and at the time, Pathfinder was my game of choice. And he had mentioned, yeah, I just got it, it came with the core rulebook and a couple neat things, and I'm really interested in learning to play it, so if any one of my watchers knows how to play this, or like runs games or anything like that, let me know, I would love to learn. Well, I mean, obviously you guys know, yes, I run games. I mean, fuck's sake, my name on this channel, the handle I use is GM Dave. Yeah, I run games. So I let him know, hey dude, I've been playing Pathfinder for years. And before that, I played 3rd and 3.5 editions, which were the predecessors to Pathfinder. I can absolutely teach you how to play. And so we worked it out. We worked out a time. I brought in a bunch of my friends who were really experienced, and we set up online and we played. Specifically, we played Carrion Crown, because since he was new, I didn't want to create an original campaign at the same time as focusing on teaching a new player not only how to play the game, but really getting him invested in it. That was my goal. So 2 of the friends that I brought in were very experienced Pathfinder players. One of them is my friend Luke, who is actually one of the co-creators over on a sister channel of mine, Fantasy Optics. My friends Luke and his brother Sean, they both run that channel. It's largely Sean's work, but Luke does a lot of stuff on there as well. Mostly when it comes to the LARPing and cosplay type stuff, Luke has a lot of input for that, as well as their Magic Gathering videos and other, card game and gaming videos. So Luke and I have been playing together for well over 10 years. We also brought a friend of ours, Ryan, a friend of ours from Scotland, into play, and actually Hannah as well, the artist for Phoenix Rising. Shameless plug, link in the description below. Remember, episode 1, the first segment of the first episode went up just this last Saturday. Check it out. Link in the description below. Read my webcomic. Come on, you want to do it. You want to. All right, I'm done with that. But I brought them in. Hannah was also very inexperienced too, so it was a learning process for her as well. But the goal was, we decided, partly since it was around Halloween, partly because it was just simpler for me to pick up an AP and run that rather than making my own campaign, so that way I could focus almost entirely on teaching this guy how to play the game, teaching him how to make his character, all that stuff. And he did what most new players do. He got really into it and really overexcited. And he dove into the role-playing side of things. He ate that up. It was fantastic. This was actually one of the greatest groups role-play-wise that I've ever played with. And I'm actually going to be talking in the future about an amazing moment, an impromptu moment, totally made up by my players because of a decision that Luke made with his character in the second portion of the adventure path, which that's all we got through. We only got through the first 2 books before a schedule shift caused us to all have to stop playing. Every single one of us had our work schedule shift, and it made it impossible for us to play. Because like I mentioned, half of our group was living in Great Britain. They're 10 hours ahead of me, 8 ahead of this guy who I brought on, 10 hours ahead of Luke. The schedule shift destroyed this game, which was really unfortunate because it was going very well. But point is, this guy who we invited, this new guy, did what most new people do, got really excited, got overexcited, started really kind of hogging the spotlight. And we were purposefully giving him a lot of the spotlight because he was new. We wanted him to feel accomplished. We wanted him to feel invested and involved. Everyone was really good about building great interpersonal relationships with their character, and probably the greatest relationship was between this guy's character, a bard named Paradar, and Luke's character, who was a half-elven alchemist named Chester, a vivisectionist who was just this dour, miserable person, and Paradar is just very upbeat and happy-go-lucky and just like, hey man, you know, very hopeful kind of person, just the exact opposite kind of person, and they just built the greatest relationship between each other. It was a riot watching these two, having these two play off each other, especially because like Paradar just developed this weird, like they developed this weird brotherly relationship where Paradar was almost like the younger brother to Chester's very unwilling older brother, and it was just fantastic. But at a certain point, I believe it really came to a head in the third to last session of the first book. So we were 2 sessions away from finishing. And it really came to a head when, skunk in the road. When, don't get hit by the car. Made it. Good. Whew, that would have sucked to have that on video. I would have felt really bad. But, it would have smelled really bad too. But anyway, it came to a head because, he started very actively interrupting people's turns. And it was very clear that he wasn't doing this intentionally. He was just very overexcited. So about 20 minutes before the session ended, I private messaged him on Skype and I let him know, hey man, don't worry about it. Don't worry much or anything. Don't freak out. But I do need to talk to you about some things you're doing after the game is done. There's a couple issues I've noticed coming up, and I just need to clarify these with you and get you on the same page so that, you know, things run really smooth going forward. I'm not like punishing you. I'm not doing anything. It's just something I've noticed some behavioral things that have been happening that I need to quash because it is creating a minor problem in the game. So I made it very clear from the start, hey, I have an issue I need to talk to you with. Don't worry about it though. This isn't me attacking you. This is just me clarifying something that I've noticed you doing that is leading to a minor problem that I want to square away before it becomes something bigger. And he was very receptive to that. He's like, hey, yeah, no, I get it. Cool. I'll hang out on the call afterwards so that you and I can talk. And he did, and I let him know what was up. I told him, you know, hey, I love the fact that you're really enthusiastic. I love the fact that you're just eating up, getting involved in this game. That's exactly what I wanted to have happen. But it is going a little bit too far. It's getting to the point where I've noticed you've actually been interrupting some of the players sometimes. So I need you to dial it back a bit, give everyone a chance to really get involved. Because like it is really enjoyable watching you chew the scenery, especially with Luke's character. You guys have a great relationship with each other, and I love watching that. But it's getting to be a little bit too much of Paradar and a little bit too little of everyone else. So dial it back a little, give everyone a chance to really put in, get their input, get their chance to shine in the spotlight too. And he was perfectly amenable to that, largely because of the fact that I made it very clear, hey, you know, I like what you're doing. I'm really glad you're having fun. But I do just need you to dial it back a little bit because you're being a little too forceful. I was very clear about it, very polite about it, and I made sure that what I was going at him with was a valid criticism. The issue wasn't how he was playing his character. The issue was that he was playing it too much. So that also leads me into my final point. You have to not just be willing to talk about what you have to say, good or bad. You have to not only be polite, and you have to, excuse me. What the hell? No. You have to not only be polite, and you have to not only make sure that you have a valid criticism that you're bringing to the table, but especially when you're dealing with the criticism specifically, you're also going to want to couch that in positive enforcement as well. Now, you'll notice when I brought this up to this player, this issue of him being a little too forceful, taking a little too much of the spotlight, I made it very clear to him at the start that I really liked what he was doing with his character and that I really enjoyed the back and forth he was having with the other players. That the issue wasn't that he was enjoying his character, it wasn't how he was playing his character, it was just that he was going a little too deep into it. He was playing it a little too much, too frequently, grabbing the spotlight too often, and he just needed to dial that back. So, by couching that, by opening with the positive reinforcement, by pointing out, even when you have a problem, even if you have a problem player, by pointing out the things that they're doing right, the things that they're doing well, the things that you really appreciate that they bring to the table, you not only make them more amenable and more open to the criticism that you are going to levy at them, but you're also pointing out specific instances and giving them a guideline that they can follow, examples that they've brought to the table themselves that they can look at and say, okay, well, I'm going to focus on doing more of this. So that way they can improve on what they're already doing well and also move away from the problem things they're doing. Because now they have something that they can latch onto, a clear example of something they're doing right, that they can build off of, and that you can then suggest other ways for them to build off of, whether it's you as a GM or you as an experienced player, or maybe even not. You don't even necessarily have to be an experienced player. You could be an inexperienced player and notice something that another player is doing that you think is really cool. Pay them that compliment and then tell them, but hey, I do think you're you're grabbing the spotlight a little too much. I'd like to have a little more chance to do that myself. So being willing to couch your criticisms in positive reinforcement is an amazing way to make the people that you're levying a criticism towards specifically much more amenable and much more open to accept that criticism. Not only that, it also enables them to see more clearly the things they are doing right. Now, there is one more thing that does need to be talked about when it comes to good communication, and that is how to deal with the type of person who, no matter what, is not going to take your criticism, who is always going to take it badly, or who is always going to be some sort of an instigator or just bad actor in some way at your table, and who is simply showing no signs of changing. Now, we're not going to get into that here, but in the next, not the next video, but the video after next for Striving for Greatness that we do, I am going to cover in detail things that you can do as a GM or as a player to deal with those problem players or even those problem GMs who refuse to accept any form of criticism, who always think that they're in the right no matter what, and just will not accept anyone else's view as being correct but their own, to the detriment of the table, and sometimes even to the detriment of the gaming group as a whole. That's the sort of thing that can actually destroy your gaming group. Those sorts of people, those sorts of players, if they're really bad about it, can be very destructive. So it's very important to know how to deal with that. We will cover that in the video after the next Striving for Greatness, which is going to be the review of that as yet and still unnamed anime. I'm not going to tell you guys what it is until that video comes out, where we will be exploring in greater detail, again, why tone is so important and how we can take lessons from this particular anime that I've been watching, whose tones took such an abrupt shift and took the anime into such a steep nosedive that what was, for the first 15 or so episodes, a pretty damn good, if flawed, show into a complete fucking disaster and mess. So look forward to that next time. That's going to be my next Striving for Greatness. Following that, we're going to discuss the issue of how to communicate with problem players, and more specifically, the communication skills you're going to need to actually deal with the problems they're bringing to your table. So that's all I have for you guys now, friends and gamers. Did you find this video useful? If so, please feel free to leave it a like. And what do you have to say on this subject? What are some communication skills that you have found to be particularly useful? Things that you guys, the more experienced among you especially, what are some tricks that you found when it comes to good communication that help you to keep your table healthy, happy, and having fun? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, again, leave it a like. And please, if you enjoy my content, do consider subscribing and hitting that bell notification button. Just make sure if you do hit that bell that the notifications are set to notify all. I don't know if YouTube has changed that back to being the default or not, but from what I last heard, the default was that they would only notify you of some of the videos, not all of them, when they're uploaded. If you want consistent updates, really easy, consistent updates, make sure to follow me on social media in the links down below. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Gab, and Minds. I would actually recommend best following me on Minds or Gab. Facebook and Twitter are becoming less reliable. They are becoming a little more problematic with the way they've been doing things lately. Also, keep your eyes open, because I'm thinking that sometime later this week, with some of the drama that's been happening on YouTube, I am thinking, putting very, very serious consideration, and by very, very serious consideration, I mean it's a 99.9% chance I'm going to do this, that by the end of the week, I'm going to be uploading my library of videos and mirroring new videos over to BitChute as well. So keep an eye open for that. Once that happens, I'm going to be putting a link to that down in the description below too. As always, friends and gamers, my name is GM Dave. I am your man behind the screen, and I'm very happy that you joined me on this video here today. So, friends and gamers of all stripes, as usual, it is my sincere hope that you continue to roll high, role play well, and game on. Have a lovely evening.